Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Nick, I'm your host, and in today's episode, I talk with Allyson Evans of Life.Church. Yep, that Life.Church, Craig Rochelle's the pastor. Many locations all across 8 states, I think she says. And we talk about leadership development, which I think is one of the secrets. I don't know if it's a secret, but I think it's one of the key factors to the growth of Life.Church, that if you dig in there, I think they do leadership development really well for staff and for volunteers. So we dig in and kind of diagnose that. What do they do for staff? What do they do for volunteers? What does it look like? How does it work? So I know I found it to be really helpful. I took a ton of notes that I'm going to use in our church as we kind of try to raise the bar for leadership development. So I think it'll be helpful for you as well. The other great thing is she shares a bunch of resources, some documents that relate to what she talks about. And you can get all of that in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 41. And of course, they have open.life.church, which is where they give away all their stuff. And you can probably get all this and more there as well. But we'll link to that in the show notes as well. It's just a really great episode. Really, really helpful. And I would love if you find this podcast, not just this episode, but all of them, to be a benefit to you. I'd love for you to leave a rating and a review on iTunes. Maybe you're listening to it right now and you can just switch over there and leave a rating and a review. That would be really helpful. It helps get it in front of other leaders, which is a good thing. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into my interview with Allie. Well, I'm honored to have Allyson Evans on the podcast. Welcome, Allyson.
Thank you.
Allie, better known, right? I think most people that know you call you Allie. That's right.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your role at Life.Church.
Okay, well, I have been at Life.Church for about 15 years. And so my kids, I've got a 22-year-old and a 20-year-old, both girls, both at University of Oklahoma. And they have basically grown up in the church since I've been on staff for so long. Married to an amazing man, Matt, and he's super supportive in my ministry. He's in the business world and kind of does his ministry that way. But we just love being a part of what God is doing in the church right now. It's such a fun season.
Yeah, and I don't know if there is a church more than Life.Church that supports the church, capital C, which is awesome. So I have to ask, even though I'm totally already going off script, first question. You've been there 15 years. What have you had similar roles or the same role? I'm sure it's changed a bit. What did you do like in the beginning? And obviously, What do you do now?
Yeah. So, before Life.Church, I was a teacher. I was a high school teacher and I was in the business world. So I came on staff as really a fairly new believer at about 20. How old was I? I was probably 29. Well, I don't know, 15 years ago, whatever that was. And, I came on as a curriculum writer, which was not a good role for me. I was new in my faith. I didn't know the stories of the Bible. It was kind of a big joke, actually, after about 6 months. Like, why am I doing this? But I really found my sweet spot in leading and developing volunteers. So kind of a volunteer relations role just on the kids ministry side early on. Became a Life Kids pastor and became an associate campus pastor at the campus that I was at. And then about 8 years ago, we started Next Gen Ministry, which in our context is all of the ministry for kids birth through 12th grade. And my responsibility is to really lead the direction, vision, training, and resources for that ministry for our organization.
And that's all campuses, obviously. Yours is more of a central role to use most multi-site language.
Yes.
So just to give an idea, because I'm 15 years ago, roughly what size and how many campuses was Life.Church? Did they have, I can't remember the history to where you were then, of course, and then where are you now? Because obviously there's so much growth in 15 years.
That's so crazy. So when I came on 15 years ago, we had 2 campuses, and now we're at 26 locations in 8 states, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
In our context, every campus is the same. I mean, when you go to the campus in Albany, New York, or the campus in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, you're going to get Craig Rochelle teaching. Kids ministry, student ministry will be the same. How we lead and develop volunteers is the same. Policies and processes and systems are the same. So it's very much consistent across all campuses. And as far as the number of kids and students we led back then at 2 campuses, gosh, I don't even remember. certainly we're about 15,000 kids a weekend now, and about 5,500 students on Wednesday nights.
That's great. And you, like you said, it's the same at any campus. So your model is very much, a franchise may make it sound bad, but the idea that we like how it's done. And so let's replicate it and make it look the same. And you mentioned that even leadership development looks the same. And that's what we want to talk about, or more specifically, that's what I want to talk about, because I want to know the secrets, the secret sauce of leadership development at Life.Church. Because, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you could speak into this from the outside looking in and knowing you and talking with you and hearing Craig do numerous leadership talks, and everybody should listen to his leadership podcast. I get a sense that leadership development is like one of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing, that's driven the growth of Life.Church. Versus maybe some church, it might be preaching, it might be discipleship, it could be evangelism. I think all of that obviously is a part of Life.Church, but it seems like leadership development. You all do that really well. So
wow.
What does that look like? And would you say that's a big part of, the growth in the culture? Absolutely.
In fact, we have a set of axioms at Life.Church. The very first axiom is everything rises and falls on leadership. Leadership is the single most significant input to success. It is a spiritual endeavor, and leadership development matters to God, and so we take that part very, very seriously, that in order to grow a healthy church, lead people into relationship with Jesus, and help them become fully devoted followers of Christ, we ourselves need to be growing as a leader spiritually, and then also in our ministry and as people. So we really value that for staff, for volunteers, attenders, and even people in the community. That's probably one of the draws that leads people to Life.Church, is sort of that bent on growth. And we don't apologize for that. If people show up to Life.Church and they say, look, I just want to be better, I don't know about this whole Jesus thing, I just want to grow. It's like, all right, whatever got you in the door, right?
Yeah. And then eventually connect you to Jesus and, grow.
Exactly.
Ways. That's awesome. So we're probably going to talk more about volunteers, because I think for everybody listening, that's probably more where they live and what they're interested in, how to develop volunteers. But I want to start with staff, because I know of some things that you all do to develop staff. So what does that look like for a staff person? How do you develop them? Maybe even from the beginning, like when they come on. And then, after they've been there 5 years or whatever.
Sure. So it's interesting. Let me just say this as kind of the umbrella over this whole talk that we do today, that we're very organic. So in the context of staff development, volunteer development, and even discipleship, we don't have a sort of a 101, 201, 301, 401 model in any of those facets. So if someone is looking for the formula, step 1, step 2, step 3, you're probably not going to find that in any of those contexts at Life.Church, because everyone's journey is a little bit different. And so from the very beginning for staff, is what you're asking about specifically to start with, we have what we call, so once you get hired, we have this event. It's a 3-day event called Inside Out. And really, it's more of, I would classify it more as an orientation to coming and working at Life.Church. And what's great about that, you think, gosh, 3 days. Well, we believe that investment, that early investment in a new staff member, makes all the difference. It answers a lot of questions, and it solves a lot of potential problems that we may have in the future developing that staff member, if they understand from the very beginning our axioms, our core values, our mission, those things that are most important to us. It's kind of the foundation and the framework on which we build our church. And so Inside Out is filled with that. We do some history of Life.Church. Where did we come from? And share a lot of stories, staff stories, attender stories, community stories of the growth of Life.Church and where we've come from, because we think that helps people sort of get inside the head of Life.Church and gain some of the DNA. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think for people listening, it's good for them to know too, correct me if I'm wrong here, this isn't like fill out the HR paperwork, get your keys, read the handbook. I mean, it's training on who we are as a church and who we are as staff.
Exactly.
It's like 3 days of, because you could have a day of, the logistics and paperwork and things with coming on staff, but that's not what this is about.
You're exactly right, Nick. It is completely separate from that. All of that stuff, that HR related stuff, that all happens prior to someone coming to Inside Out. And that's a whole separate, those are sort of the logistics of coming on staff. This is the heart of coming on staff. And so Inside Out is sort of step one. And then as each of the team members, this is team members from every area of Life.Church. So web developers who are on the YouVersion team, or a Life Kids coordinator at a campus, or a central staff member who leads on the learning team. All of those people come to Inside Out and get that same orientation. Once they've accomplished that step, those 3 days are over. Then, of course, they go to their team, and then leadership development starts from day one. And we definitely don't have a program where it's like, okay, you're in development or you're in training for 3 months. We actually, one of our sort of statements about leadership development is that we believe people develop best while in the game. And that's kind of a banner statement over development and training. So we kind of throw you into the fire in a way that's very graceful. And we want people to learn while they're in the game, because we believe that's where the best learning happens.
That's good. And you have, I think when we talked before, you have the Inside Out, so it's 3 days. It's for everyone. Is there, and then next there is some training or onboarding for your area. Is that correct? Somewhere else?
Yes. Yeah. So for instance, I'll just use Next Gen. For Next Gen, those new team members, then hopefully we can arrange it on calendar so it's right after Inside Out, but oftentimes it may be a month later or so. But the Next Gen staff members come and hang out with us here at Central, and we do sort of a similar thing. Here's who we are as Next Gen. Here's how what we do lines up with what we're doing as a church. And then there is some more real practical training. Here's what it looks like to budget inside of Next Gen. Here's what it looks like to prepare and execute great kids and student experiences every week. Here's how we lead and develop our volunteers. So those things get a little bit more practical, and there's some more training elements there. I'd call it more training than leadership development at that stage.
Yeah, because it's tactical and hands-on, and like what you're going to do. Yeah, that makes sense. And so you probably developed that too. I imagine, I don't know if curriculum would probably be not the right word, but you probably have the content down for what you're teaching them. Versus it seems like a lot of other leadership development Life.Church, like you said, is more organic. There isn't a 101, 201, 301. But here, because it's the same, it's probably a little bit like that. Is that fair to say?
Well, yes, that is true. And although the leadership development that I was talking about earlier is a little bit more organic, we're kind of obsessive about systems and processes inside of the organicness. I don't know if that makes any sense. But for instance, if someone is, they need to learn how to do a better job of coaching their volunteer team. How do I help people move to the next step in their development? We do have a very static developing others through coaching class that's offered about once a quarter. Now, when a team member shows up to that and takes part in that very specific learning opportunity is really up to them. That's the organic part. But the fact that that content exists and it's static and it's good quality and there's a regularly scheduled opportunity for people to take advantage of that learning is pretty hardcore. Does that make sense?
It does. It's almost like, so I imagine you have some other classes too. So there's almost a free market approach to it. So the organic part is your journey is not the same as everybody's journey. It's not step 1, step 2, step 15.
Yes.
But here's a pool of opportunities that we create for you that you can take advantage of. That makes sense. Okay.
Yes.
So that's what it looks like for staff, obviously, coming on board in the early stages. How about volunteers? What does leadership development look like for volunteers? What does onboarding look like, the early parts for them?
Okay. Obviously, we're not going to probably have an Inside Out kind of an event, a 3-day event for every volunteer.
You can't get volunteers to come for 3 days and just not work and whatever.
Yeah, we would love that. Wouldn't that be great? But what we have, obviously you do all your normal stuff. You do a great job of casting vision about what it means to serve in your particular ministry area. Someone says, yes, I want to explore that opportunity. There's obviously the background check for safety. And then once someone is approved on the background check, they attend, in our case, a Next Gen orientation. And so in the context of that orientation, we cast a little bit more micro level vision. Like, it's important for people to know at that stage that we ask our volunteers to serve every single week because we value consistency in our small group context, because we do have a small group model for how we do ministry for 2-year-olds through 12th graders. And so that's an important aspect to share. So we share some of the heartbeat of our ministry. We don't get into a lot of policies and procedures and that kind of stuff in the context of that orientation. Honestly, the orientation is a great out for people, because once they've heard that, man, this is not babysitting, we do ask for a high commitment. We believe in the value of what, being a part of this consistently is going to mean for you and for kids and students. How do you feel about that level of commitment? Then they move on to, yes, I want to be a part of this. Every week sounds great to me. Then they move into the more practical training. And again, you learn best while you're in the game mentality takes over. And so we'll send a brand new volunteer into the environment within which they want to serve. So if they want to lead ninth grade girls, we send them to Switch on Wednesday night, and they'll shadow a ninth grade girls leader for 2 or 3 weeks. And there'll be a follow-up by what we call a coach, which is a volunteer level leadership role. And the coach will follow up with that new leader and say, hey, how's it going? Do you have any questions? Do you feel equipped? We equip them through resources on a website called Life.Church, which is for folks who lead inside Life.Church volunteer teams. And we equip them that way with all the resources that they need and that kind of thing. And then, of course, they're getting kind of on-the-job training as they're shadowing that leader. And then after that, then we would allow them to have their own group. So that's kind of what that process looks like for a volunteer.
That's great. I just want to do a little tangent just real quick. You mentioned you have leaders, weekly leaders for kids from age 2 up through high school. And I think a lot of people listening probably don't have that. So I just love for you to speak a little bit, not so much. I think you could talk a little bit about why. You already said that because of the importance of it.
Right.
But do you get people that say no? They come to the orientation, it's like, I don't know if I can do that. And like, how,
for sure.
What would you say to someone who's afraid of that? Like, I don't know if I can ask for weekly, especially if that's not my model right now. And I have all these people who serve once every 4 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever. What if they quit kind of thing? Yeah,
for sure. And, and I want to say this too. It works for us for the most part. And I'll be frank, we don't have a waiting list for volunteers. There's not people saying, oh man, I can't wait to get a spot to serve every single week. We still, like most churches, struggle to have enough leaders. If you're a church that has one service time, it wouldn't make sense at all in most cases for you to try to transition your volunteer leadership team to serve every week. Because when are those folks going to go to church? Unless, of course, you have like a church online platform or something. But in our context, most of our campuses have 6 to 9 services a weekend. And so the likelihood that you can find another service time to attend while you have your every week serving commitment is pretty likely. Now, we do have people that say no. And what's interesting is when they say no, it's almost like they're apologizing to us. Like, I'm so sorry, but because of my job or because I only have my kids every other weekend, I really protect that time and don't want to do anything else other than attend church together. That, I wouldn't be able to be here every single week. And we totally get that. And we honor those people. Our mission in Next Gen is to lead kids and students to become fully devoted followers of Christ. It's not to find a great place for every adult to serve. Now, Life churches we have sort of a vision that every single person would have a place to serve. And so if serving every week and Next Gen doesn't make sense for you, we're going to find you a place to engage because we want you using your gifts and talents and your abilities. We want you to grow in your faith by exercising in your own personal ministry. So we'll find a place for you to serve in the church.
That's good. So you have other roles. It's just you're really specific about that small group leader role that it needs to be weekly.
Right. Or you could serve on the host team or in campus ops or, some other capacity. We certainly have open hands as it relates to helping adults find a place to serve outside of Next Gen.
Now, once someone's on the team, and this could be either staff or volunteer, they've been serving, they're in their role, they're placed, it's 6 months, it's a year and whatever. What does training and development look like maybe for staff? Because I mentioned we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and you were sharing how you do sort of like a all staff in an area, Next Gen team gathering, where there's different training and even breakouts with different content and stuff like that. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what ongoing development looks like for staff, and then maybe we can jump to volunteers.
Sure. So ongoing development. Well, let me just say this a little bit. I want to hit on culture because we do have a culture of development here. If someone is the same today as they were 6 months ago, we're not doing our jobs. But the underlying foundation of that is everyone is responsible for their own growth. So if you're sitting around waiting for your leader to say, hey, Nick, I have this development opportunity for you, or Nick, I see that you need to learn some things in this area. You need to learn this new skill set. That is just not going to happen in our context. We kind of look at it like, listen, you're grown and you are pursuing Christ and you're pursuing ministry. No one should be more passionate about you being better tomorrow than you are today than you. And so, we've had people every now and then say, well, I just don't feel like anyone's, focusing on my development. And then the response to that always is, what are you doing towards your development? So I think that's an important thing to note in our culture, is that we own our own development. And in order for that if I go way off, Nick, just tell me to hush and I'll come back. But
no, this is good. You just keep going. I'm writing notes over here, actually. So
oh, okay.
You just keep going.
So each of us, we go back to that sort of, we each have our own journey. Second to you own your own development and then, you develop best while in the game, is really the key to development is self-awareness. And so even as early as our interview process, we have several different testing components that we have a potential candidate to come on staff go through so that they can learn about themselves. It's less about us learning things about this person, although that's important, but things like the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, spiritual gifts test. There are things like that we do before someone comes on staff so that they can gain some self-awareness. Because until you're self-aware, you don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You don't know the places where you do need to grow. You don't know how a particular strength, underdeveloped, could become a real threat to your ministry or to your personal development. So self-awareness is a really big part of that. Now, to go back to your question, development is happening on a personal level all the time. I have one-on-ones with my immediate team here and ask them, where are you growing? I have one team member who's really struggling with having some tough conversations. She leads other staff members, and she's like, I just feel like I'm beating my head against the wall, and I'm challenged with how to have these kind of conversations. So she and I are having talks about that, and then I'm referring her to people on staff who I know have had to have difficult conversations with staff members and lead them to a different place. And so she's meeting to gain insight and wisdom from staff members who have operated in that conflict. Does that make sense? So for her, yeah, that's part of her personal development. That's ongoing, and we should always be staying on top of that. As far as the next gen team coming in for, say, quarterly retreats, which is what I think you were referring to initially, we do have those opportunities where folks come in, everybody on the next gen team comes in, or in this particular case, we have what we call an operational all staff. So everyone from every campus will come to Oklahoma City. I guess it's in 2 weeks. And we're going to hear from Craig. We're going to hear from our directional leadership team about, where are we going in 2017, some big picture Life.Church kinds of things. And then I'll have a full day with my whole next gen team, about 100 people, kids and student ministry staff members. And I'll be able to share what our goals and measurables are for 2017. And so we'll talk through those things. Then we'll have those breakouts that you mentioned. One of the breakouts is how to give and receive feedback in a way that's healthy. Another breakout is how to lead through conflict. Another one is navigating change, because you guys know that in an organization that's always growing, change is inevitable and it needs to be embraced. So how do we navigate that change? So there's different breakouts that are more broad in nature, so that every team member, again, whether they're on YouVersion or HR or worship or next gen, they can reap benefit from those breakouts. So it's almost like a little Life.Church conference for staff.
Yeah, and even then, a lot of that's organic, right? Because as we were talking before, those breakout ideas, you're kind of coming up with them based on just felt need. What do you think will be helpful? It's not necessarily just pulling something out of the canned list all the time, right?
Exactly. It's kind of, where do we find ourselves? And, the one about, leading through change, we just recently experienced some different kinds of change. And there was just a lot of conversation around that is, how do I help a volunteer who's serving in the ministry adjust to this change when she was so passionate about the way we used to do things? How do I help this parent work through this? This parent feels like we've cut something when really we've enhanced something. And so, change is something that's important. We feel that, like you said, it's a felt need right now. And we want to address that now because that's important to our staff. Feedback, we are definitely a culture of feedback. So that's typically always going to be a theme of a breakout when we gather our whole staff together, because we are all about giving and receiving good and tough feedback in a way that's life-giving.
I want to highlight something too. I didn't know this, but you said that's quarterly. Those kind of come to, they all come to one campus and it's sort of like an inside conference for Life.Church staff. Is that accurate? It's quarterly?
Yes. So the whole staff comes together twice a year. So operational staff meeting is in the first part of the year. And then we have something called family reunion that happens in September or October. And we bring spouses in for that as well. Because oftentimes spouses, they participate in all of the parts of family reunion, some of which is just great fun stuff, which is actually part of our value system. And then some of it is very specific business related development, those breakouts that we talked about. But even spouses are out in the workforce for the most part and learn and benefit from all of those topics as well. So that happens in the fall. And then there's another time or two during the year where I'll pull all of my next gen team together for something similar.
And the thing that stands out to me is you're talking about people, again, it's 8 states. Is that what it is? So you're
Yes.
paying to, get people to travel to one location 3 or 4 times a year because you value leadership development that much is probably what I would highlight. Because see, at a single site church or most multi-site churches that are kind of around one town, you could see where that would be way easier. Everybody drive an hour and a half, whatever it is. But that's different for you all. You have to really value it to get it done. That's interesting. Yeah, I was wondering, as you were talking about, is this all on site or is this kind of a simulcast thing? But I guess it's so much better on site because you get everybody together. And while Life.Church is a big church, a lot of campuses have one kids pastor, one student pastor. You know what I mean? Right. The simulcast would be a little bit, just the two of us sitting here watching, that's not what you're really going for. Probably going for some community. How else, if there's anything else that you would say, this culture, like how do you have that leadership development culture? Some of this obviously is part of it. How do you, and maybe the specific question would be, you said people, you want them to own their own development. Mm-hmm. And some people will kind of talk about how they're not being developed. So there you have someone that's clearly saying, I'm not owning my own development. How do you help them own their own development? I mean, is it the regular meetings that you have with them where you ask about it? How is that culture really shared?
Well, and we all know this to be true, is that a lack of growth, it won't be long before your performance and how you're feeling about your ministry, how you're responding to people, your relationships, all of those things will begin to take a hit if you're not growing. And of course, again, that includes the spiritual aspect. I mean, obviously, we're a church. We value people growing in their personal relationship with Christ, and it's foundational to everything else that needs to happen as you lead your ministry. And so it'll find them out, Nick, usually. And in the context of their team leader having a one-on-one with them, or they're evaluating their dashboards. Hey, let's take a look at your numbers. Or, we had talked about you involving 40 new people in the ministry at a volunteer level, and you've gotten 10 people involved. Tell me what's going on. So typically in those contexts, we'll find out, what's happening. Well, I just don't know how to have a conversation with someone in the lobby. Well, light bulb, there's a development opportunity. Okay, so what do you need to do to get more comfortable having a conversation with someone about how they can exercise their faith here at the church? And then, so it's sometimes as simple as that. Is again, helping someone create that awareness. The fact that you're not recruiting volunteers, for lack of a better term, is a reflection of your timidness to really approach people about the benefits, the blessings, and the opportunities in exercising their faith by serving here at the church. So let's talk about that. Who can we connect you with that does a great job of casting that vision and recruiting volunteers for the ministry area? Let's get you with them. So that, that's a development opportunity right there. So it's in the context of those conversations. One of, I kind of already mentioned that, people grow when they own their own growth. People develop best while they're in the game. And then I also talked about self-awareness. The fourth kind of guiding principle for us related to development is that it's really difficult to grow outside of trusted relationships. And so your team leader or your peer having conversations with you, strategic conversations, a mentor, whatever that may look like in your context. It's in the context of those trusted relationships that self-discovery happens, that development opportunities arise, that you begin to kind of highlight some of your strengths or weaknesses that need to further grow and those kinds of things. So I don't know if that answers your question, but really it's inside of those trusted relationships that we help people own their own growth.
It does, and it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the regular conversations with staff or with volunteers are really what help drive it. That's what helps make sure everybody's getting developed, is because we're talking about it. So if there's an area that needs developed, it's coming out in that conversation. How often does that happen? Like for staff, is that a monthly one-on-one? For volunteers, do coaches meet with leaders a certain number of times a year? Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question. In fact, I've been with my immediate team, which is only 4 other people. I only directly lead 4 other people, and just met with them this week. I had a one-on-one with each of them, and I said, listen, I want to apologize because when you lead rock stars, like the people that I lead are super next level kind of leaders. I've honestly become a little lazy in my leadership of them. It's like I've almost sort of made this unfortunate assumption they don't need to be led. And so I just, in a moment of transparency, I'll share that with you, that it's like, I need to apologize, you guys. All of us need to be led. Craig Groeschel, our lead pastors, our executive pastors at our churches, they're all being led or mentored by someone, right? And so I talked to my team and I said, listen, let's get some one-on-ones on the calendar. What do you guys need from me? And here's what I discovered, Nick, is that all 4 of them had a different answer. One of my guys said, you know what, I don't need a one-on-one. Your door is always open. And typically when I have a need, I know I can just pop in. Another team member said, I really would like to have every other week. I'd like to have a one-on-one. I want to sit down with you and kind of go through, here's what I'm experiencing with the staff that I lead, and seek direction from you in certain areas. And then another team member said once a month is good. So for me and my immediate team, I kind of left it up to them. In the context of a one-on-one meeting is almost like good mentoring, in that they need to come to the table and have, here's what I want to get out of this meeting. So in other words, that one-on-one time is led by that team member, not me. Now in the context of an hour-long one-on-one, if I do have something to interject or something to share, I will. But at the end of the day, I expect them to come to the table with some kind of an agenda for that. So there may be times when we meet where the thing is, hey, I've got nothing. We've had great meetings this week. I know exactly what's on my plate. I'm feeling good. Do you have anything for me? And we may just shoot the breeze, for an hour, or cut the meeting short and get busy.
That's awesome.
And then as far as volunteers, it's a little different. We have our coaching structure. Coaches are higher level volunteers who lead other volunteers. If you've got 300 volunteers, there's no way 2 staff members can, know all of those people. And so we have a coaching structure at the campuses where a coach leads, say, 10 to 25 people. And so their ability to know those folks is a lot better than the staff to know them. And so they may not have one-on-ones because those people all have jobs and families and those kinds of things. But most of them have group me's and things like that where they're all connecting on a regular basis. And then where there is special need, or we see, man, this person has a ton of potential, the coach may pick 1 or 2 of their 20, 25 people and say, listen, we need to spend some additional time investing in this person. They are really interested in staff level ministry, for instance, or what have you. And so let's invest some additional time. Or we've got a team member or 2 that are a little bit challenged. They're not executing the curriculum well. They're not connecting with parents the way we've asked. They've broken safety policies or what have you, that may need a little additional attention as well. And so that happens more at that coach volunteer level.
And so I have like 5 questions. So some coaches lead like 25 leaders. You said obviously that's a high end, but that's a lot. I would imagine that's
a lot.
Got to be a lot of time in there. Because I know a lot of churches have a similar structure where it's leaders, lead kids or students, and they're led by coaches. Same thing you have there.
Right.
But I haven't seen a lot where, at least on purpose, they're leading 20 to 25. I'm sure that happens all over the place, when you just can't get as many coaches as you want. Do most of your coaches come from leaders, or is it just a mix? Some led and you identified the leadership potential. Some you totally asked to be a coach,
yes,
because they'd be a better coach than they would be a leader.
That's a great question. Yeah. So it's a both and. In some cases, someone's been serving, in the baby room, and they've just done a great job of connecting well with the other volunteers they lead. They care for the children well. They connect well with parents. They ideate with staff. You've got that kind of person serving anywhere. We may ask them to elevate, like, hey, how would you feel about us pulling you out of the baby room and allowing you to coach at the 10 o'clock service, all of the baby rooms, which in that case, that would be, if it's one service time and we have 3 baby rooms, that may be 18 people, but it's pretty easy to connect because you see them every single week. And so that person may come out and just be a rock star at that. In other cases, we have folks that come to us from, say, the business world, and they're like, listen, I really value next gen ministry. I value investing in the next generation. However, I'm not really good at connecting with teenagers or elementary age kids, but man, I know how to lead people. I run my own business and I'm pretty successful at it. Do you have a space for me? We can definitely pull them straight into a coaching role. They're obviously less likely to do any kind of training. Here's how you execute Bible app for kids curriculum. Obviously, they've never served in there. So they need to be exposed to how the curriculum runs, but the value they're going to bring to that coaching team is going to be more about leader development, connecting with people, developing people, inspiring people to show up every week, pastorally leading those folks. So there's going to be other capacities where that person brings the most value.
And then, just so people understand the whole structure, leaders are led by coaches, and then coaches pretty much are led by staff. Correct?
Exactly. Yes.
So that's pretty much the structure right there. And then we were talking before we recorded, you all, like I think most healthy growing churches, get a lot of your staff from inside the church. They're developed as people who started as a leader, became a coach. And then you said that something that you've had for the last 5 years is this leadership experience, LXP.
Yes.
It's kind of like an internship program, and somebody can do that and then, move their way into staff. What does that look like, and what would a path look like to go from being a volunteer coach to LXP, to staff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there really are 2 ways into that program. One is, just like you mentioned, someone who's been serving on a campus or already involved, in our culture. They know Life.Church. But we also have folks who come from outside of our organization, from other churches, or from the, straight out of college or even straight out of high school, that come and apply for the internship program and are accepted and become a part of that. So there's two legs to the LXP program. One is a summer internship program, and it's obviously short. It's a couple of months long, and you can actually be a pre-senior in high school. So between your junior and senior year of high school, you could actually become a part of that. Now, typically, I can't tell you that we've ever had an intern that age come in that was outside of Life.Church culture. Like those kids don't, someone outside of our culture wouldn't even know that we do that. So those kids are typically going to be kids who grew up in Switch or grew up in Life Kids and want to be a part of what God's doing here at Life.Church. And then obviously kids who have graduated high school or in their college summer time can apply for the summer LXP internship. And it can be here at Central. They could be someone who is a graphic designer and they come and intern with the graphic design team, or they're on a campus in Albany, New York, and their passion is to be a youth pastor someday. They can do their summer internship at any of our locations or even here at Central, supporting our Central staff. So that's a great brief learning opportunity. Then there's the 9-month or 7-month program that there are 2 on-ramps during the course of a year, and it lasts 7 or 9 months. I can't remember which or if it's both options, actually. And I think you can be up to 25 years old to enter into the internship program. And again, we do have people from inside the organization and people from outside of Life.Church who come and apply for that and are accepted into the program. So it's just a great way to come and learn a lot. And we really value our interns. So our interns are not, grips on a set somewhere, and they're not getting coffee for people. We're actually leading them and exposing them to real pastoral opportunities, leadership opportunities. And then they do some grunt work, of course, but, that's all part of the learning process, is getting kind of behind the scenes. But that has become a very valuable tool for our pipeline related to staffing. In fact, almost all of our next gen people come through the LXP program at this point. So it's really important to us.
I didn't realize it was only for 25 and under. So if you have someone who's like a career, like so maybe they volunteer as a coach, they're 30 years old, but you think they might be great staff, they don't do LXP. They probably maybe just move into a process of getting
exactly.
hired.
Yeah, so LXP is not a requirement to be on staff for sure. And we even have, we may have a 22-year-old person who's been serving and excelling at the campus level, or a 30-year-old person or a 50-year-old person at the campus level who's been serving, and whatever their background is, and they are welcome to come through the staff interview process. In fact, there are times when a young person in particular who has less life experience comes straight into the staff. We agree, those who are in the phone screening and that early testing stage of the interview process, we think, this young person really ought to just come straight into the staff interview process. And they come to that, and then at some point during that process, we realize, let's take a step back. Let's see if they'd be interested in LXP for 7 or 9 months. Then we'll talk to them about staff. So it just kind of depends. But again, you don't have to have done LXP to be on staff.
Yeah, and we've talked before, and you've kind of said that the model for staffing in the next gen world is you have. Do you call them kids pastors or kids directors? What's the title for the kids and student leaders at a campus?
Kids pastors and youth pastors, yeah.
And then if the campus gets large enough, you have associates. So associate. But that would be a pretty large campus, wouldn't it? What would be like a typical size of the campus overall, like average attendance, before you had an associate kids pastor and associate youth pastor?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we keep our staff on campuses pretty slim because we have such a great central support system. So it's, a youth pastor will typically run as a solo staff member at a campus until they're running about 250 students. And then kids pastors will run that same way until they're about 250 kids. The difference with kids and students, we tend to have more kids staff than we have youth staff because kids ministries tend to grow more than our student ministries grow because, you've got 8 service times for kids to show up to and that kind of thing. Nick, you did that survey, which was so valuable, and you really prompted me to go back and do some research about should we hire based on the number of leaders we need to provide excellent ministry to the number of kids we have, or should we staff based on the number of kids? And it just turned out that we seem to be in a good place either way. But I really thank you for doing that because that helped me shift my thinking from, we just add a staff member based on the number of kids they're running, as opposed to the number of leaders it takes to do great ministry at a campus their size. So anyway, side note.
Yeah, and I will link to that survey in the show notes if someone wants to take it and see the results. I think the interesting thing is you're right. Like you said, it worked out good both ways. But sometimes it's just perspective. Like I almost, even if it ends up the same, it's almost better to think of it in terms of the leaders you lead.
Totally agree.
Just so you don't create a culture of where we staff to serve the kids. Which sounds terrible, I guess, just to say it just like that. But I mean, like we staff to serve volunteers who serve kids, I guess, and so like I didn't really think about that much either. In fact, I did the survey to see the ratio of kids to full-time staff. That was the whole point of it. But it was very obvious that churches like yours, even if you weren't multi-site, you have a very lean staff, and the way you get there is because of the volunteers, the structure, coach level, all of that stuff, how you're asking volunteers to lead in big ways, giving them a lot of authority. Yeah, that's how you get there. Now, do you all have, I'll ask this of you, I don't know if you have this. I've heard of some multi-site churches where they have ratios on the campus, kind of like you said, we hire a student pastor at this size or a kids pastor at this size. some of them will staff central based on campus too. So it's like we need one full-time person at the campus at the central for every 5 full-time people at campuses. I'm guessing you do more just based on the need. Like, what do you sense is needed? Or do you have some kind of ratio there?
We don't, but you know what? That's a great question, because we just in the last couple of years have created a new level of leadership that's been very successful for us, and it has been great at identifying really next level staff members who have a lot more horsepower than, like they're running a great ministry and they have all this horsepower. Let me explain it this way. Let me just go back. Instead of adding staff here at Central to support the next 5 campus, let's say we add 5 more campuses. So there's 5 more youth pastors and 5 more kids pastors. Instead of adding a staff member here at Central, what we're doing is we're elevating an enroll kids pastor and a youth pastor. We call them cluster leaders. So you stay enroll as a kids pastor running your campus, and then you also then are a peer leader, and you become the dotted line leader for 5 to 6 other kids pastors that are closest to you geographically. So we call that geographic area a cluster. So in Tulsa, for instance, we have a kids pastor at our Broken Arrow campus. She leads a great ministry. She's a very high level leader and has tons of horsepower. And so then she's a peer leader and the dotted line leader to the other kids pastors in the Tulsa metro area. So that's a great system for being conservative with your staffing budget, while at the same time allowing someone to stretch their legs a little bit more beyond their campus to show their leadership chops. Does that make sense? And it's been very beneficial. And we do that with kids, students, host team, campus ops, and worship.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And it's even helpful too, because this is almost true of any level of staffing. Think of it like with kids. If you were staffing one full-time person for every, let's say 150 kids, well, it's really hard when there's 225. Like, you haven't hired the other one.
Right.
You're running, 50% more than, well, the same could be true here. You could, like, you've got 5 new campuses going in. It's harder to pay for and budget and hire a full-time person. But as you're adding each campus, it's way easier to ask someone who's already, doing a job and can give 5 hours to it. And then now I can give 8 hours, and now, kind of grow into it naturally to where it's its own full-time role.
Exactly.
That's probably really helpful. I see a lot of churches do that with small groups, where they don't actually have, like, adult small groups, where they don't really have a separate coach role. It's more like you as a small group leader are kind of like the mentor to 5 other leaders. And
right.
And there are benefits to both models,
for sure.
Yeah. But that one's an easier one in some ways to step into, because again, it's not a whole new thing. It's not a whole new staff position that you have to hire and pay for. It's not a whole new volunteer role that you have to go get.
Yes.
That's good.
Well, let me say this too, for any other multi-sites that are participating in this. One of the things that happens when you move to Central, for instance, in our context, you're off of a campus. And so you almost immediately become somewhat irrelevant. Like, I've honestly just forgotten campus life. I'm not living it and breathing it every day. In one sense, I just really hate it, because I'm not exposed to the stories and the life change every single Monday morning when, the staff at every campus is sitting around sharing stories of what happened, and they're crying. I mean, that's a part of what happens in a church staff. And in a multi-site where you have a central structure, sometimes the leaders like myself are pulled out of that kind of the beauty, the blessing, and the burden of being at the campus level. Whereas a cluster leader who's in role brings the benefit of both. So Britton, for instance, in Tulsa, is very much still in the weeds in ministry, and she still has all those benefits. And so when we at Central say, hey, Britton, we're thinking about rolling out this new initiative, she can say, listen, guys, let's think through a campus life schedule. Is that really going to work for our staff to execute that initiative? Let's talk through that. And so there's all kinds of benefits to having that enroll cluster leader. Yeah, does that make sense at all, what I just said?
It totally does. In fact, our friend, when we were together a couple weeks ago at Next, our friend EJ Swanson was saying that in their model, they have intentionally had campus staff on central teams. So not like you're talking about, but like, say I'm on the central curriculum team, or I'm on the central content, this team, central execution of that idea team. And he said one of the biggest benefits is they totally have a voice in it, as opposed to you're just giving me stuff. And kind of like you're saying, they also have a different perspective because they're executing it, at the campus level, which is good.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Well, I could talk about this forever, but we've kind of hit all these questions here, and this has been great. I've taken a lot of notes that I'm totally going to use at our church. But I know some of the resources that you've talked about, like everything, you all give it away. So people can get that at Open, right? Is that open.life.church probably?
Yes.
And there's a leadership section. And I don't know if there's anything else, maybe afterwards, if there are any other resources or documents or things, we can even link to them in the show notes, like right to it. If
Sure.
it's available on Open, or if it's something you could share that's not on Open, great. We'll take anything you can give.
Yeah.
But people can download that. How can they connect with you if they have any more questions or want to learn more?
Well, I really am open to anything. So you want me to just give you my email address?
If you want, just know people might email you.
Absolutely. Just hit me up. I really am open. I love to visit with people from other churches because I'm constantly learning from how all of you guys are doing things. So my email address is ALLYSON@Life.Church. So that's the best way to get a hold of me, probably. I'm also on Facebook, Allyson, and then my maiden name is LEWTER Evans, and Twitter and Instagram. So just look me up. But yeah, if you're looking for anything in particular, if I've said something and you're like, "Ooh, I'd love to challenge her on this or ask more questions," please just email me. I would love it.
All right. Well, people probably will, which would be good. They probably have a lot of questions. This has been really, really helpful. Thanks so much for taking the time and kind of letting us get a window into Life Church and leadership development and all of that. It's been really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Nick. It's been a lot of fun.
Wow. That was good stuff, wasn't it? I mean, I wanted a deep dive into what leadership development looks like at Life Church, and I think that's what we got. And like I said, she shared some documents and resources that relate to what she talked about, those axioms and all of that stuff. And you can get that in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 41. Here are a couple action items that I thought of coming out of there that I'm actually going to do. One is to think about coming up with leadership axioms for your church. So however you're going to train volunteers and staff, do you need a couple key statements that really set the tone and the culture for what you want that to be like? Like I loved all of the ones she shared, but certainly the idea that we own our own development is huge, because afterwards when we were done the conversation, actually, I asked her a little bit more about that because I feel like I'm trying to create a better leadership development culture in our team, but I probably was viewing it more of a top-down, we push it to you, we hold you accountable, we're the ones driving it approach, and I like what she said. That's definitely a lot better and a lot more healthy. Another action item would be to get good at one-on-one meetings, having those conversations like they have where you can talk about development and where am I, and ask that question. As a leader, you can ask someone on your team, what do you need from me? And kind of let them drive that. I thought that was great. And another action step would be to put in a structure. Their structure is to have the leaders and the coach and then, staff lead coaches who lead leaders. What is your structure? And if you want to learn more about this and even talk about content and ways to develop people from one level to the next, you'll want to listen to the episode next week when I have Todd Adkins from Lifeway Leadership. They're doing a great job rolling out resources for leadership pipelines and all of that. They have the conference, they have the free ebook, all this stuff. So Todd and I talk about what is a leadership pipeline, how is it used, and practically how would you start one as a children's pastor or student pastor? Like what does that look like? So you don't want to miss that. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll have Todd in next week on the podcast, and I'm sure that'll be really helpful to you. In the meantime, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.